Oh my gosh, I am here with Tom Sykes, who runs the Royalist Substack and is the royal correspondent for the Daily Beast and is also my man inside the explosive court case going on in London right now, where Harry and his friends, including Elizabeth Hurley, Sadie Frost, and Elton John, are suing the Daily Mail and claiming that the Daily Mail illegally wiretapped them, blagged, which is when people pretend there's someone that they're not just to get information, and did all sorts of other illegal things to get stories on them. Tom, you got to catch me up. I know that Harry was in court yesterday, and then he also appeared today, not actually testifying, but to give support to Elizabeth Hurley. So let's start with yesterday. Harry cried on the stand. What happened?
Yeah, so it's definitely the media trial of the century. 7 huge celebrities taking on the biggest newspaper in the United Kingdom, and it has been fireworks all the way from day one. There have been witnesses changing their stories. There have been allegations of paying of witnesses. There's been all kinds of skullduggery, allegations of dirty tricks by the rival teams of lawyers. And it all came to a head yesterday when Harry came into court, gave evidence, got into an argument with the judge, which is always an unwise thing to do, and then broke down in tears. Managed to restrain himself until he got off the stage, but started sobbing as he said that the Mail had sort of got their revenge for going after him by making his wife's life a total misery, my lord. And so it's been non-stop, and really at the heart of it, Harry alleging that the Mail and the Mail on Sunday, these all very old stories, some of them 20 years old, used basically published stories that were obtained using unlawfully gathered information. That's the nub of it. And some people would say it was 20 years ago, mate, let it go. But Harry doesn't seem inclined to let it go. So it's going to go all the way now.
So what happened? And also, what does the Daily Mail allege happened? And we've talked before about how several witnesses have backed out, changed their statement, claimed that Harry's lawyer forged their signature and forged their statement. How is this still allowed to go on when these witnesses are backing out?
Well, yeah, there've been lurid allegations on both sides. A private investigator called Gavin Burrows gave a extraordinarily detailed statement saying he put listening devices in cars, on windows, that he bugged cafes in London, that he tracked their movements, all this kind of thing. Then promptly, not promptly, but a year later, declared the statement was a forgery, that his signature was a forgery, that it was not safe for him to come to court, that he needs to give evidence via a video link from a secure location. I mean, essentially, Harry's team, their argument has been, look, do you really think we'd have submitted a false statement with a false signature in our legal package, signed off, notarized by our lawyers? You know, of course it wasn't forged. That's basically their argument. But it leaves them in an incredibly difficult situation, because they're claiming that on one hand you can rely on this guy, and on the other hand you can't rely on this guy. So that's been just one of the issues. But I suppose fundamentally what they said in court when it came up was, they said, look, he's just one of the private investigators. That there's plenty of other evidence. And to be fair, I was a real skeptic of the case, but I think Harry has got a very strong case in relation to one specific story published by Rebecca English, a very well-known, very senior royal correspondent, a really core part of the Mail cadre, of the face of their royal operation. Very clear, it seemed to me, very clear evidence that she used a private eye to blag information about Chelsea Davies' flight home from a holiday in South America. And then very damagingly, the private eye suggests, oh, well, actually, I've even got her seat number. It's 16A and 16B is free. Why don't we plant someone in 16B to talk to her all the way back and get all the secrets out? So I think the Mail are in trouble on a couple of stories. My prediction, for what it's worth, is that Harry's going to win on a very narrow, limited number of the cases. He's put in 14 stories that he says are the fruits of UIG, unlawful information gathering. The Mail just completely deny it. They say, no, nothing to see. My suspicion is that the judge, it's a civil trial, so it's not beyond reasonable doubt. It's the balance of probabilities. My suspicion is that the judge, on the balance of probabilities, will decide that at least one of those stories was indeed the product of UIG, which leaves the Mail in a very difficult situation. If it's Rebecca English's story, it leaves Rebecca English in a very difficult situation, but we won't know the result for at least 2 months.
Okay, so just for our viewers out there, Chelsea Davy was Harry's very serious girlfriend whom he dated before Meghan. There were talks of them getting married. Chelsea said she didn't want the lifestyle, left. I have a quick question, though. So if Harry wins on one count, does that mean the Daily Mail has to pay all court costs? Because right now it's up to $50 million, just the lawyers and court costs for this case.
Yeah, so the short answer is no. If he won an absolutely stonking victory and won on everything, he probably wouldn't have to pay any costs at all. But if he just wins on one case, he's unlikely to have to pay more than 50% of them. And remember that the 50 million is divided between the 7 claimants. So, and there are other stories going around that the costs are actually being capped, that there's outside donors helping to offer to pay for them. So, look, Harry is not going to make any money out of this case, that's for sure. And I do believe that is not what this case is about. This is about pursuing his vendetta with the Daily Mail.
Well, he also said, just to go back to what you were talking about earlier, that he had made complaints about the Daily Mail, and now he's claiming that because of this court case, the Daily Mail has gone after his wife, Meghan Markle, with a vengeance, which is also why he broke down in tears yesterday. Do you think that will stop if Harry wins?
I think it will actually. One thing that newspapers don't like is you can get in trouble under sort of UK press law if you sort of vexatiously pursue somebody who you've had a legal dispute with. So I think to a sense, I don't think it will. I think, look, it's never a good idea to pick a fight with people who buy ink by the barrel, right? So, ultimately, what did Harry expect by launching a massive legal fight against the Daily Mail that threatens their editor, that threatens their takeover of the Telegraph, that threatens their status? That, what did he expect? That they weren't gonna hit back? They weren't gonna fight back? Of course they were gonna fight back, and of course they're gonna fight back clean, and they're gonna fight back dirty. So, there it is. I think that the problem that Harry has specifically with the whole case is that A, he just looks like a massive whinger, right? Who's going on about stuff that happened 20 years ago. And B, it's just incredibly hypocritical because he talks about how awful it was being commodified by the British media and how he's been commoditized his whole life. And yet there's his wife sticking all the photographs on Instagram, like literally as the court was opening, photographs of Lily and Doria swimming in the pool, photographs of Archie feeding a rhino. And especially when you look at this whole Brooklyn Beckham thing that blew up the other day, it's like, how can you sit there and say it's absolutely terrible to commoditize a child, and then while you're literally commoditizing your own children? So I think Harry's got bigger problems. Like, I think whether he wins or whether he loses this case, it's a bit of a disaster, really, because I think people are fundamentally they do feel it was very wrong what was done to Harry as a teenager and as a young man and to his girlfriends. And of course, it's hideous. Like the thought that your, flight could be tapped and someone put next to you like a plant. It's disgusting. And as Harry said, it's creepy, and I am completely down with it. But I think why it's hard to have sympathy with him is that, like, at the same time, he's still spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on PR operations to try and influence the papers.
Mhm.
It's not like he was just like gone off to live a quiet life. And Meghan, is like just publicizing herself all over Instagram, the kids all over Instagram. I mean, the kids are 6 and 4. Like, and I would argue they are the most famous children in the world under the age of 7, because, like, because of the fact that she has made them such a part of the story and Harry's made them such a part of the story, so far from disappearing for a quiet life in Montecito, we've actually got this kind of, completely hypocritical situation where they're saying, it was so terrible. I was part of this institution. My image was manipulated. I was never allowed to complain. I was never
Mhm.
allowed to do anything. My reputation, my image was harvested to, make the rest of the family look good. And they're doing exactly the same thing with the same
Yeah,
kids.
I do find it ironic as well. So yesterday, Harry gets in a little tiff with the judge, and you were watching him, and it seems like he was pulling at straws and splitting hairs. Can you briefly describe that?
Yeah, so actually it happened 3 times. So the first time the solicitor was asking him a sort of slightly, aggressive question, and Harry really went off on one, refuting all the evidence. And the judge intervened and very sympathetically said, "Listen, Prince Harry, uh, you're doing what a lot of people in your situation do, which is you're trying to address every single thing that they're saying. Now, that's actually not what you're here to do. That's your solicitor's job. That's your barrister's job. You've just got to answer the questions to the best of your ability.
Mm.
So don't get distracted and just answer the question." So he goes back. Then it happens again, right? And the judge this time is a bit firmer and is like, "Look, you got to stop. You got to stop doing this, because this is not what it's about. Your legal team will make the legal argument for you, like, blah blah blah." And Harry kind of starts going on about how associated newspapers are trying to strip all the color out of everything and trying to twist it and blah blah. And he's like, "I know that's what they're trying to do. I'm a lawyer. I'm the judge, right? I've been. Do you know what I mean?" And then it happened a third time. It was absolutely mad. So there was this story about how Katie Nicholl, one of the journalists, had called up Natalie Pinkham, who Harry was in a relationship with, and had asked her for comment, and she'd given a comment. And then Katie Nicholl had rephrased it as saying, like, she'd spoken to a source or something. And Harry's point, right, which is very obvious, is like, well, obviously a source who, in most people's understanding is slightly different to somebody who you call up and ask for a comment. Like, it's a bit
Mhm.
misleading or what have you. And the judge was like, "Yeah, I know what you're talking about, mate. I'm a media lawyer. I understand what you are saying. Stop going on about it." And
Mm.
it was like Harry got into a ding dong with the judge. And it's a really silly thing to do, because this is not a jury trial. That one judge is responsible for the decision. So,
Wow.
you want to be a little bit cautious about getting into an argument with the judge. He just looked petty. He
Mm.
looked entitled. It was sort of very, it was very kind of off with their heads,
Well,
you
you
know?
said you said in your writing that it was a bit of a dirty trick because Harry was supposed to actually give evidence today. And then out of the blue, they call him for a day earlier. So that also might have affected his, I don't know, preparation. But then he showed up and he wasn't actually giving testimony or giving evidence today. He showed up anyway. Why is that?
Well, I think fundamentally he didn't have anything to do, because I mean he's in London till tomorrow anyway. So I suppose he didn't have anything to do, and he thought he might as well go along and show support for Elizabeth Hurley, show a united front, and blah 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 blah. But then what was very odd was that then he disappeared, and this is why I was saying there were more fireworks today. So 12 noon or whenever it rises for lunch, he's suddenly gone, and he's next sighted at the House of Lords. apparently having a meeting with Baroness Lawrence, with Doreen Lawrence, who's one of the other defendants. And Doreen Lawrence is really, really important to this case because she's the only one who's not like a celebrity with a PR machine. You know, she is the mother of this kid called Stephen Lawrence, who was murdered in this horrific racist murder in London in the 1990s. The Daily Mail were very influential in naming the people alleged to have killed Stephen Lawrence, and were very much like, you know, would have. So it was astonishing when Doreen Lawrence said, actually, I've learned that I was the subject of UIG from the Daily Mail, because she is not like, you know, like I was saying, like Harry, it's all very hypocritical, frankly, because
Right.
he's got his own PR team and it's like, you know, but Doreen Lawrence doesn't, right? She is like an incredible campaigner for, you know, against youth crime and
Mhm.
for, you know, she's an amazing woman. And we thought that Doreen Lawrence was giving evidence tomorrow, and suddenly at the end of the day, in the sort of closing statements, suddenly David Sherborne, Harry's solicitor, suddenly goes, "Oh, I'm afraid we haven't been able to get anyone here for
Hmm?
tomorrow." So there is a rumor, and I hasten to add, there is a rumor going round that perhaps Harry went to go and meet her to stiffen her resolve.
Mm,
Shall we just put it that way?
right.
We don't know exactly, obviously, what the content of their conversation was, but it did feel a little odd for Harry to suddenly shoot off to the House of Lords to see Doreen Lawrence, and for the fact that Doreen Lawrence, who we were kind of, now it's not set in stone, and the judge was very clear, you know, when they were talking in all the discussions at the end, because Sherborne was kind of going, well, it's all the Daily Mail's fault for messing around with the schedule, and the judge was like, well, you know, basically told him to shut up, and you know,
Hmm.
said, look, these things happen in trials, stuff gets moved around, that's the nature of it. And but it is notable that she is able to be in the House of Lords today, but can't come to court tomorrow. If she were to drop out of the case, then it just becomes, it's not the end of the case, because they're like individual cases folded within, which is what's sometimes
Right.
referred to as a super claim. So if she were to drop out, I think that it would be it would affect the perception, the overall perception of the case, because then it's just a bunch of
Right.
celebrities, right? It's
So,
Elton and David and Liz and Harry and blah 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 blah. It's not this figure of absolutely unimpugnable moral
mm.
authority.
So what exactly did Elizabeth Hurley say on the stand today?
So basically, how it works in these trials in England, you have a witness statement that you
Mhm.
submit. So Elizabeth Hurley submitted her witness statement, which is released at the moment you're sworn in. And we all the journalists get to read that. And in fact, it's available to the public on like the judiciary website if you're really keen. And she says in it, again, similar to Harry, she lists 15 articles and says why she believes these are the fruits of unlawfully gathered information, and explains her distress at each one, you know, completely freaking out, like who's betraying her, who's telling these stories. And then actually, you know, Gavin Burrows' statement says that he's been putting listening devices on the windows, that her phone calls are being listened to, and the contents past the Daily Mail, etc., etc., etc.
Wait,
And
I have to butt in for a
yeah,
moment just for our audience. Gavin Burrows is the private investigator who now is taking back and recanting his statement, saying he never said all that, he never did that.
well, slight clarification. You can't actually recant the statement. So the
Okay.
statement still exists as part of it. But he's then submitted another statement saying the first statement is not true. And
Wow.
basically, Harry's team are saying that Burrows too is not credible, because there's no way that they would have submitted Burrows 1 as part of the bundle had they not, you know, sat down with him and got it. Like, you know, there's people who've
Got it.
co-signed it, there's witnesses, there's, you know, so they're basically saying, look, he's for some reason, you know, decided to try and screw up our case, basically, is what, I mean, they're not literally saying that, but so Elizabeth Hurley basically was then, you know, talking about the impact of
Well, and she says the stories were basically revealing who her son Damien's father was, which was, we then learned it was Stephen Bing. What
Mm.
other claims in the stories did she say came from blagging or wiretapping?
So, I mean, there was stuff about her health. There was stuff about where the baby was being born. It was a lot of it was focused around Damien and around the Steve Bing case and that remarkable Vanity Fair story that still to this day people probably remember of a certain vintage where they had they called it. Do you remember the he said she said?
Mm-hmm.
And it was all Stephen Bing saying that he'd been snookered into becoming a parent, and saying that he'd had threesomes and all kinds of like very very lurid details. And of course she was beside herself, and a lot of it was about that whole
Wow.
period of her life. And she was like, at the time I just thought that it was Stephen leaking it. And then she was talking actually about Anthony Pellicano, about Stephen Bing hiring Anthony Pellicano to go and sort of menace her and all. I mean, it did sound absolutely dreadful. But then on top of all of that, she's saying that the Mail were like literally listening to her phone calls and running stories about it. And I mean, like, if those get over, if those claim, like, in a way I feel like if Harry's claim gets over the line about one person got a flight, you could make an
Mm-hmm.
argument. I didn't know that the guy was breaking the law, getting the flight details. I mean, I'm terribly sorry. Is it even illegal? I don't even know. Was it illegal 20 years ago in Argentina to look over someone's shoulder at the flight manifest? I don't know. But clearly putting a listening device on Elizabeth Hurley's window to
Right.
listen to her private phone calls while she's sobbing her heart out about Steve Bing planting all these horrible stories about her in Vanity Fair, being a sort of brazen hussy who's tried to trick him
Right.
into becoming a parent for a payday. And there was one, like, she said, there was like a cartoon in the Daily Mail of her kid, like, going, "Oh, I'm so lucky to have my dad's DNA because now I'm going to get millions." And it was all really
Right.
gross, and the Mail looked terrible, frankly. And it was a real reminder of the sort of horrible excesses of tabloid journalism back in the, and really how it was so misogynist, the tabloid media in those days. And the way it kind of attacked Hurley as a kind of
Temptress.
slatternly temptress. Yeah, it was really really shocking, actually. And you felt for her. She was very good on the witness stand,
Mm.
very composed, very elegant. And just kept saying, they kept saying, well, this is her, and she just said no. She just said no, and she kept her cool, unlike Harry.
Well, it's interesting too, because it must have been horrifically traumatizing during that time. She feels like she's being attacked, but she also feels like she can't trust anyone because she's assuming, she's no idea her phone's being tapped, and she's assuming that what's going on is her friends are leaking. So she thinks she can't tell anyone anything. So, other than Harry, who else was in the courtroom to support her?
No, I think that was it. I mean, they're not big places, these courtrooms, so
Right.
they're getting quite full. Even by the
But
time
you
you've
got
got,
in.
yeah, yeah. But even by the time you've got the legal teams and you've got this and that and the other, they keep a few spots for the press. But yeah. So that was it, really.
Her
It
son,
was
her boyfriend, Billy Ray, didn't show up.
Billy Ray didn't show up, I'm afraid to say. No, no, no.
Mhm.
And yeah, Damien was there, and I thought that she was. I thought that she was a very good witness. Actually, I thought that she made a very compelling case. I thought she kept her cool. She refused to be rattled, and as you say, she just said, it's really traumatizing because you have a you we she kept saying, I'm not complaining. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm just saying that maybe, people shouldn't be listening to my phone calls.
Yeah, just maybe. Now,
Mm.
during this testimony, what was Harry's reaction?
I mean, he sort of sat there. He, doodles occasionally on a notepad. But as I say, he left quite soon into it. So he was kind of gone by 12 noon, I
Wow.
think. So, so I think, yeah, so we just don't know why he suddenly felt it necessary to
Right.
go and see Baroness Lawrence. But
you feel it's because Baroness Lawrence might be wary of testifying and dragging up this part of her life.
I do, and I also think that her testimony is so dependent on Gavin Burrows, like, because it's obviously her witness statement hasn't been released yet, but from what we know of it, it specifically involves the bugging of a cafe where she would meet friends, and I think I think there's always been a lot of pressure on her from the Mail, who've always said, listen, we were the people who went to bat for you. We were the people who, at great risk to ourselves, named those people who killed your son. We are the people who forced the inquiry that came up with this famous phrase of institutional racism being a thing at the Met. We have done so much for you. Are you sure? Are you sure that we bugged you, that we did this, that we did the other? And ultimately, all that Doreen Lawrence, I think that Doreen Lawrence was potentially, manipulated into doing it by being shown this statement from Gavin Burrows, which
So you're
he now
saying
repudiates.
that, I'm so sorry to interrupt. You're
Yeah,
saying that Harry's lawyer may have manipulated Baroness Sherborne by showing her the statements.
well, we know that they went to her with the statements and said, look at this. And we know, so we know that, whether you want to call that manipulation or not. I mean, yeah, I would call it manipulation because I think it was important for them to have her as part of the claim. So it wasn't just a bunch of celebrities.
Right.
So it had this kind of moral heft about it. So I think if she does drop out at this stage, obviously the trial still goes ahead. The judge is a big boy. I'm sure he'll make the decisions based on the appropriate evidence. But it looks very different if she does drop out.
So Elizabeth Hurley testified today. Harry testified yesterday. Who else is coming on the stand, and how long do we think that this case is going to last, or at least with the celebrity witnesses?
So there's no testimony tomorrow. So they're going to use a bit of court time for what they referred to as housekeeping. And there was some discussion about, who would and who wouldn't be there. And then we're expecting them to be back next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Potentially Baroness Lawrence, Elton, Sadie Frost. Jude Law was going to testify, but he is now not going to testify. He was due tomorrow as well. He is now not going to testify because his witness statement is not being contested. So, as I was saying, this is how it works. You put in a written statement, then if they want to contest it, they can do the cross-examination. So Jude is not going to be appearing. What does that mean? Sadie won't. What was very notable about the Harry and about Elizabeth today was that what you'd expect in these sort of scenarios, right, is that when Associated Newspapers say they need a full day, that's because they need to spend, they think they can spend a full day tearing Harry down, destroying his credibility. Well, in fact, they were finished in an hour and 40 minutes, and so the perception definitely from friends of mine who are lawyers is that that's a good day for Harry. Like as a claimant, if you can get out of the witness box in an hour and 40 minutes without them really landing a blow on you, that's a pretty good day. And again, with Elizabeth Hurley today, she was there much less time than we expected.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tom. We're going to have you back on because you're our man in the court and we need to hear everything. I appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.